If you have followed the rules but feel unsatisfied with where that's gotten you, this podcast is for you.
We'll help you learn how to reach your goals through creativity, intuition, and flow.
Welcome to the Flow into Authenticity podcast.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome back. Season 2.
It's so nice to be here.
Yeah. I decided I was going to show up as a banana today, but I can't figure out how bananas talk. So I mean, it's a good question. How does a banana talk?
I don't know.
I like this. I'm just thinking about like the
Mushy,
banana in my mouth.
mush mouth, yeah.
Yeah, my daughter has started eating bananas, like whole bananas, like holding the banana and chomping off bits, and she always takes too much, and it's like, I guess that's how a banana would say hello.
Sounds like it's
All
in
right.
distress.
Allison, we love you.
All right, so we're here today. We're part of the crew, the Flow Posse, who, that sounds really gross.
I
That
was
sounds
like, I
bad.
don't know. That doesn't sound good.
All right, I'm just trying things out. Um, so we wrapped season 1. As you might remember, we had a 12 episode season where we talked about the flow framework, which we're not allowed to call it, where we talked about tools that you can use to reach goals in your life, get unstuck, find a more fulfilling, authentic life harnessing your creativity, harnessing your intuition, connecting with your intuition, and achieving flow in your creative processes. And, you know, you don't have to be an artist to be creative. We're talking about anything, any kind of work that you do has a creative element. So just connecting with that creativity and that flow to help you feel like what you're doing is more satisfying, more authentic for you. So all of that was episode 1, talking through the framework. And in this, or did I say episode 1?
Season 1.
Season 1.
one.
Okay, so all that was season 1, and in season 2, we're going to just be going deeper. We're going to be talking about more specific situations you might be in. We're going to be going deeper and thinking about our values, deeper into talking about flow and intuition. So that's what we got teed up for you in season 2 of Flow into Authenticity. And before we get started today on our episode about being in the dark, so we're gonna go to some interesting places today. Before we get into that, we just wanted to do a check-in and see kind of what we've been up to the last few months. So I know that Esther has been through a lot this summer. I'd love for you to tell us a bit about what your last few months has been like.
Yeah, so I have a lot to say about being in the dark because I feel like I've been in it for the past like couple years. And really this process is really about like how do we lean into going from this old way of sort of like pushing through that and forcing ourselves, hustling, to really how do we get to the next level to grow into the next level of who we're becoming with more ease, right? And more flow. And so that's kind of like what we are talking about. And so oh my gosh. So at the end of season 1, I was talking about how frustrated I was with where I was living and wanting, I guess I wasn't really sure what I needed, but I was in the process of trying to figure that out. And we were selling our house, trying to find a new house. And so I'll talk more in depth about that. But throughout the course of the summer, I I honestly didn't work very much. Like I couldn't at all, which was so frustrating for somebody like me who loves working and like
Mm-hmm.
struggles with finding her value through work. And so I really just I was traveling and at the same time selling our house, which took a little bit of time and trust and then finding our new amazing place, which we just love. So I feel like I'm kind of in a 180 from where we were. It's been a wild, really wild ride.
Yay!
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it feels like big time relief in so many ways. And honestly, you guys, at the end of last season, I was like, does this process really work? Like it was really like I was like, well, shit, if I can't like manifest my next step and what I want, like, and like trust this process of growth to the next part of my journey through this process, what am I gonna say if it doesn't work out? Right. And it's all just like baby steps, but it definitely feels like kind of a bigger leap because had such a hard couple years. So
And that's
yeah,
a lot of what we're talking about today is when you're in the dark, you
Yeah.
can't see what you're
Can't
doing,
see.
right?
No.
Like literally you
it's
can't you
Yeah.
can't see how what you're doing is leading to your next step.
Right.
And I think that's why so many people are, we lean on the old model of trying to make it work through our hustle, trying to make it work through the formula that we've been taught or how somebody else tells us to do it. But like, it's this new kind of, or not new model, but like a different way of thinking of leaning into the ebbs and flows of life and your intuition and the flow.
Yeah,
And
instead of
that-
like actively digging yourself out
Yes.
all the time, exhausting yourself when
Yeah.
you're already exhausted. Like, how can you
Yeah.
lean into that differently?
How about you, Leslie? What you been doing this summer?
Yeah, I had a great summer. There's nothing in particular that was so exciting or grand, but like you, like had a rough couple of years, obviously alongside everyone else going through a pandemic, and prior to that being pretty sick. So this summer was just like nice. It was just relaxing. Got to spend a lot of time with my family, got to go on a few small trips, got to go to a writing workshop with um one of my most favorite authors and meeting people that I have been writing in community with for these pandemic years, but never had been able to meet in person. And so that was
Wow.
so exciting. And just, it felt really great. Like I didn't get sick until the end of summer, which was nice. Like I was just felt like I was able to function, which has, and beyond surviving. So it was
Oh my
really nice.
gosh.
It
I
was a
feel
long time
that.
coming.
I
Isn't it kind
feel
of
that.
magical to be around people after not having been around people in person for a long time?
Yes, it was very strange. I've never been to an in-person writing workshop. Everything I've done has been online.
Right.
It was surreal. It was so bizarre and it was totally magical. We actually talked about that. We were there just being in that space and yeah, it was wonderful. How about you, Allison?
I had a pretty low key summer because I was working quite a bit and I was actually pretty grumpy at the end of the summer about the fact that I worked so much this summer because I'm in academia and a lot of my colleagues are doing a lot of playing and traveling and stuff during the summer, so I kind of
Yeah,
felt like I
yeah.
was missing out a bit. But what I learned when I was coming back to work is all the stuff that I was maybe not totally taking for granted about my summer, but that I wasn't realizing was as impactful as it was. So throughout the summer, in the mornings, my kids would go to camp and I would work on my back porch sitting in the sun. You know, I'd have Zoom meetings back there, and I'd have my computer back there, but I'd have my coffee and just be sitting under this umbrella with beautiful trees everywhere and this gorgeous
Wow.
weather. And even though I was working, it didn't feel like work because it was such a lovely environment to be working in. And I was working on stuff that I felt was really fun. Um, and also, I got a new car, and there was a period of time when I was driving my son to camp, and I would get to drive back by myself and just driving alone in my new car,
Yes.
without any kids in the car with me, and I would kind of gun it when I could. Like just those small moments, like the half a second when I would gun the, put the pedal to the metal. Um, they gave me such joy that just sort of carried me through. So I learned that I just need to look for joyful moments in the little moments and kind of reframe how I think about different experiences.
Yeah, and I think that we're going to talk about values next time and how your values, your core values, tie into this whole process of reaching your goals, through more flow. And I think that observing those small moments really clues you into what your values are because everybody's different. So, like, not
Yeah.
everybody might find the same joy out of the car or, it's really
Right.
interesting to be in those places when you can observe that.
Or
Yeah.
naked dance parties. Oh my God. That's one of the best parts of every day too, is that, after the bath, my kids are crazy, and you can be
Oh,
really stressed out by that. Or if you
right.
give into it, it's so fun because
Yeah.
they run around naked
Yeah.
and they're so hilarious and goofy. And if you're just like, shit, I gotta get clothes on these kids, this is so
Yeah.
annoying, then you'll have one experience. Or if you're like, let's bring out the drums and play drums while these kids are dancing naked, then you have
Yes.
another experience.
That is
Yes.
such a good metaphor
Yeah.
for this process too. Like, if we have this like closed mode idea of what we should be doing and the outcome and like the time frame, right? We're going to be so stressed when, we have a chronic illness episode or things don't work out in the timing. But if we can like flow and be like, okay, what's happening now? Naked dance party. Cool, cool. Okay. We know eventually we're going to get to
Yeah.
bed, but like, let's enjoy this moment that life brings us, right?
It's like
Yes.
yes anding, right?
Yeah.
Ending. Yeah,
And it's also a
exactly.
good reminder to be present,
Exactly.
right? You're not
And deep
thinking about,
embodiment.
oh, this is
Deep
how I'm going to
embodiment.
be so
Yep.
stressed out because we're never going to get to sleep. Like you just being present, be like, oh, this is
Yes.
what we're doing now. All right. It will end. It'll transition into something else. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had like chronic insomnia for the past like year, and I just had to be like, you know what? It's what we're doing. We're watching some stupid show at 2 in the morning for a couple
Yes.
hours every day because
Yeah.
that's what we're doing now.
I had
So,
Right.
that too. And I like finished 2 books. I was like, well, look at me. I just ended up reading, right?
wow.
Like, so it's like looking at it
Wow.
differently, even though it's
Yeah.
just so frustrating in the moment. You're like, oh my God, I just want to be asleep right now.
Now I'm just taking
Right.
sleeping pills, but
Yeah.
now I
Hey,
just
whatever works. What do they say?
so
Better living through chemistry? What does that say?
yeah, I don't know. Well,
So,
yeah.
Esther was telling us about this quote that she heard on Michael Mead's podcast. When you feel low, go lower. When you're in a descent, dive. And I think that connects to what we've kind of been talking about, of like when you're in something, be all into it.
Yeah.
Accept where you're at. And so we're going to be talking about some things related to that theme, and especially, when you're in a place that's kind of dark.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
don't be afraid of the dark.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want me to go ahead
So,
and
you know, Leslie was saying that's what my whole book is about.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes, it really resonates.
Yeah, can
Yeah.
you talk about how that comes up for you and in your experiences that you're writing about in your book?
Yeah. Um, well, and Esther, you and I talk about this a lot because we unfortunately share the common thread of chronic illness. And there's nothing like illness to take you out of being able to do anything but be kind of be in the dark, right? You can't hustle, you can't will your way out of it. It's just you really have to learn to accept what's happening to you. And then how are you going to move forward? And that is when I was in the throes of my illness and I couldn't do anything, my body had stopped making blood. I could not be in my life. I was just trying to survive. Um, and I lived in the hospital for about 6 weeks before my transplant, and people would often ask me like, "Oh, aren't you bored?" Like, or they would send things for me to do, which is so incredibly thoughtful and wonderful, and I feel so lucky. It's I just at that time, I couldn't do any of that. Like, I wasn't bored because I didn't feel good. Like, I didn't wanna do anything. I didn't need to be distracted. I just was just, trying to wake up and, not be totally consumed by what was happening, and then I found a lot of people, know, want to say, "You just have to be positive. You just have to keep going. You just have to think about all the good stuff and da 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 da." And some of that is true. A positive mindset can help you, but I think there's a difference. I know everyone's heard the term toxic positivity. Um, there's a difference between acknowledging that things are bad and then like what you're saying, Allison, choosing also to see some small joys in things,
Mm-hmm.
versus like just being like ignoring the fact that something bad is happening. Like it's okay. I really had to learn how to acknowledge like, no, this is terrible. Like this is really
Yeah.
hard. I'm dying and this is not a there's no spin on that, right?
Right, because
There's
otherwise you don't feel seen, right? Is that true? Like
very true. Yeah,
if
people want to dismiss like you're like, no, no, I really just need to feel bad. And
yeah.
once I learned how to do that, I found everything was easier to take because I just
Mm.
accept it. It really became about acceptance. Like, yep, this is terrible. And I have all these wonderful people around me that are helping me get through this. And, look, I have this beautiful view out of my hospital room. Like, like I get to stare at this gorgeous tree and, like finding all these little things. Like, I could still use my body to some extent. Like, I can still get up out of bed. I can still walk. Like, these are good things. And I also feel terrible. And this is, like holding those things to both be true and really it really just became about acceptance, and that's kind of what I've been learning. What it also did is when you remove, and I think people got a little bit of this in the early parts of the pandemic when everything was shut down. When we remove all of our distractions, we're just left with ourselves. And you really have to start confronting like, hmm, what do I want? You really do what you're talking about, Esther, with value. Like you really start to question your values and you question what is it that I want in my life? How do I want to feel? Like, and it becomes there's a clarity with being in the dark that happens
Mm.
because everything is distilled down to the present moment.
If you can get past the panic about the situation. There's
Yes.
probably like the thinking of a person drowning, right? There's the stage
Mm-hmm.
where you're just like flailing, and then there's the stage where you're just like um,
Absolutely.
still.
And it's not linear, right? It's
Right.
not
Yeah.
like once you get to this place of calmness that you might not panic again.
Right, right.
I mean,
Yeah.
that was like cyclical, right? And so for me, I had to lean heavily into like meditation, right? It became that is how I had to start my day because it allowed me a calm space to be, and that became very important to me to start my day like that because that became what that did for me was highlight that's a huge value for me is
Mm,
having calmness,
yeah.
having a calm environment. And so post this, I've really curated my life to have that, right? Like, oh, that's too stressful. I'm not going to take that on because that's too much. That doesn't support how I want to feel. That's too much for me. That's too much for my body. It's too much stress. It's whatever. Like, I learned how to understand that and hear that and move through that differently. I don't know if that really answers what we're talking about.
That,
I feel like maybe I've
that's
gone off on a different tangent, but
no, no, that's really cool to hear because I know how much you're doing actually. So for you to, be doing these writing workshops and retreats and to be presenting at these storytelling events and to be writing a book and writing articles and all the stuff that you're doing, it's not like we're saying, if something's stressful, just reduce all stress in your life because it's all bad.
mhm.
It's like choosing what things are worth the energy.
Absolutely. It's a whole like spoon theory. I think I don't know if
Yeah.
anyone's heard of that. Yeah, like I
Mm-hmm.
have to decide how expensive something is going to be for me. Like we went and
Mm,
visited some friends
Mm-hmm.
this weekend and they're very active people. And I had to say, I can't do all of that. I could pick one of those things, but if I do all of them, I will be wrecked for 3 days. Like I have to pick. So it's just learn and being in that time in my life has allowed me to really tune into that and to know myself so well that I can now set up my life to be successful and do stuff like that and do
Yeah.
writing workshops, but also knowing how to say no, which is huge for me because I never said no to anything because I'm a
Yeah.
totally reforming people pleaser. So all of that time in the dark has allowed me to really know myself in a very specific and much more authentic way.
And also, everything that you're creating, I think this is what people need to understand is that coming from just a productive oriented culture, everything you're creating now, everything you're producing now was was gestating in that dark time, whether you knew it
Yes.
or not. So people think of the darkness as bad. Like our culture really sees the darkness in a negative way. Like we should be positive, like high vibes. Even just like thinking about white culture, how we demonize like darkness, a skin tone, like just even, but if you think about it, in the universe, like everything's created in this dark, kind of chaotic mystery
Hmm.
space, like the winter. So that
yes.
really hard, cold, dark, chaotic, scary time. That's why in these other cultures, it's like, well, if you're sinking, go deeper. If it's dark, go deeper.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because you're going to find, like, in that time, whether you knew it or not, you were like that little seed in the winter, like it was creating something, but you can't see it,
Right.
you know?
It's like the
Yes.
primordial soup at the beginning
Yes.
of the
Yeah.
earth. It's like
Yes.
you
And
need
that's kind
all
of,
this
The beginning
crap
of the
and
day, like the beginning of dawn is
yeah.
darkness, yeah,
And you are really
everything.
reduced to that when you're in those hard times,
Hmm.
right? That's what you
You
have
are.
is that soup. You're this soupy mess. And then,
So,
yeah, I
yeah.
had
How
no
do
idea
we,
that I was
yeah,
brewing on any of this stuff, but I 100% attribute it to that experience.
yeah.
mm,
So,
How do we value that?
yes, when we're traditionally told not to, that we should just constantly
Yeah.
be
And
like you're saying, high vibes, you know, be
yeah.
happy, just do it.
So,
You can pull
How
yourself
does
so
that
out.
connect to your intuition? Because it
okay.
sounds to me,
I'm
yeah,
trying to
Yes.
Esther's
ask.
about to
Yay.
take off with this.
Okay, what it really says to me is that quote, when you're in the darkness, it's actually two quotes okay, so when you feel low, go lower. When you're in descent, dive. What that says to me is instead of fighting it, right? Like you're talking about, Leslie, get curious, right? Be present, number one. Number one. Just be with it. When I was in my dark time, the past like 3 months, my intuition was like, okay, just stop even trying to do anything like at all. Just be present with what is and acknowledge it. So I would be like, I'm feeling shitty, my body hurts. That's it. Like I would just literally say it to myself. And then
Yes.
or like I'm thinking about doing something that I can't do. I'm thinking about doing. And so just number one, like being with it. And then number two, get curious, right? So the idea of that our life and our intuition, so I always talk about the intuition is leading us to our most authentic self and our most authentic expression, right? That part of us that's like covered with these like cultural norms or beliefs, like we want to actually get in this lifetime, like get to that deeper, authentic place. So these times, these dark times, I really think are they almost in my life they almost come before like the next like big kind of leap into growing into my next self. So your intuition, if we let it kind of lead us through that darkness and allow and actually like after we accept kind of get curious, right? What's going on now? Like what do I feel that I want in the next step of my life? So get like, because and then your intuition, like once you kind of identify what is it that I want. So in my case, at the end of last season, I was kind of in this real state of confusion of trying to get curious about what my next step is going to look like. Because I really felt like things needed to change. I had that feeling and nothing was changing. Like it was felt this very stuck, no matter what I did, it was just, our house wasn't selling. We weren't finding our place, and so really getting curious about what I need as far as my values that I'm kind of been ignoring. So like one of my values is beauty and freedom, like traveling and things like that, and getting curious about what the next step in my life is. And your intuition will this is where your intuition comes in, right? It'll sort of lead you to what that next step is, I have found. So like I started realizing, oh yeah, I need to be in a place where for me, like I did this vision board and it was all windows, like apartments with windows. And so I began to realize that what I actually wanted was not a house, not another house. My husband and I didn't want to buy another house. We just wanted to be in a location where we could like walk to more things, to be in a beautiful area, I really wanted this view. Like, I don't know why, but that was just the feeling that I had that I wanted.
And
And
sun, I mean, if you
Sun.
can't get
sun,
warmth and heat, at least you can get light. That makes
well,
a
that's the thing.
huge difference.
It's so much warmer here. Like I'm getting constant like sun in the afternoon. It's hot. Like it's for Seattle, it's the most sun I could probably get, which is one of the things on my list. So anyway, in that darkness where I wasn't able to do anything, think about creation, right? Anytime like in the cosmos when like planets are being created. Like there's this, or, evolution. There's this sort of seeming chaos, but something new is being created, right? And so, but you get to actually choose what that is. And your intuition will start. I mean, and this is like, we could get into the brain, the neuroscience of this, but your intuition will start to, on a subconscious level or a conscious level, figure that out, how to get you there. And so when you're in that dark place, it's like really this place of creativity and curiosity. And it can be so cool if you just embrace it. But it's
Now,
really hard to trust, to be in that place of trusting that it can happen when you're just waiting for kind of the timing, right?
yes. So waiting for the timing. So what you're talking about reminds me of when I was single.
Yes.
And how one instinct when you're single and you don't want to be single is to just go out and meet as many people as you can and just try and kind of hustle your personal life.
Right.
But then you might miss out on someone who you could have met a year from now, who isn't going to be ready for you until a year from now. So, really, sometimes the best thing to do is to just wait and not try and make something happen. Maybe it's not the right time for something to happen. And just waiting and being calm and trying to find that peace, like you were talking about, Leslie, trying to not be anxious about the fact that nothing's happening, that you can't do anything about your situation right now, but just finding some peace in that sort of waiting and the holding pattern that you're in can be really helpful.
So what we're talking about, if you've been following us through season 1, is the beginning of the funnel. It's the first step of finding inspiration. So if we're talking about, and like I created this process from studying the creative process, right? And so the beginning of, as we're talking about this as the darkness being this time of the very beginning of creation, starting with that finding inspiration. Once you kind of accepted that you're in this beginner space, right? It's really a beginner mindset and the letting go, which is really hard, but you're really at the beginning of that funnel of finding inspiration, getting to know yourself again, embracing yourself. And really it's like that, in those mythologies of, Michael Meade talks about like the pearl, right? Diving deep into the darkness to find the pearl. And the pearl represents your purpose. So in all these cultures and all these mythologies, or these like Buddhism and Hinduism, they see the pearl as representing your life's purpose or your deeper self. And so diving into that darkness, uncovering the pearl is like, the beginning of like finding your deeper purpose, really.
Yeah. And I feel like if you can lean into that, like what you're
Yeah.
saying, get curious, Esther. And I don't know if you said this earlier or if it was when we were talking earlier offline about this, but or maybe it was you, Allison. It's magical. Like there's something magical about it. And it's extremely, extremely counterintuitive from what we're
Oh,
taught.
so much.
So it's very difficult to lean into that. But if you can just find
Yeah.
that space that you can allow yourself to accept and to be still with it and then just be curious about it. It's pretty incredible where that can lead you and open up for you. Just as Esther, like look at all these wonderful things that are happening for you. You found this amazing place. It has all this light, like it's connecting, you're being able to connect more with your values. But it's hard won, right? It's hard won. You
Yeah.
had to go through some really difficult time.
Yeah.
It didn't happen on the timetable that you wish it would have.
Yeah. Yeah.
We always want to happen faster.
And
Aren't
Allison, you were
there
gonna.
aren't there some other things that happened for you more career oriented that you couldn't see were on the horizon, but they're coming to light now?
Yeah, it seems like a lot of things. I won't go into too many details, but there's a lot of
Okay.
things. Like, I mean, I make lists of things I want to like manifest or like goals that I want to come into, and just so many things. It's like as soon as we moved, just all of these things. I mean, I got it's sort of like a grant from the city, like where people will just it's like you get $500 worth of like services for people to help you to kind of like start your business or grow your business. I got that.
Mhm.
I got like I got a new studio. I got um, different people looking at my work in a way that I wanted before. Um, I won't tell them our little secret, Allison, but
Right.
yeah, just like really a lot of things. So these things could be all coincidence, but I've found in my life that, it's there's these cycles that happen, which, you know, it's interesting. I just like observing them and what's going on when and what other people have to say about these things and other cultures and systems of teaching of what they say about these dark times, instead of
Mhm.
relying on our culture to hustle through, just do it, Is there a time when we can just relax into the flow of life? And Allison, you had a really good sort of analogy or
Yeah, well,
this.
so I was watching this documentary recently that maybe some of our listeners have watched called, what is it called? The Rescue? Yeah, it's on National Geographic documentary film about the rescue of this team of like middle school aged boys. Um, their soccer team had gone out into these caves with their coach one day, and then all of a sudden, this monsoon rain hit, and they got trapped in these caves in Thailand. And the documentary is about this like 2 week mission that this group of cave divers and a bunch of people who are supporting this rescue mission by pumping water out of the caves and doing all sorts of things to try and enable this rescue to happen. But what I found was really interesting about this situation is there are these boys stuck in this cave with their coach, and they're in complete darkness. It's cold. They're wearing like their soccer jerseys and shorts, and they're freezing. They have no food. In the cave they're in, they're starting to lose good oxygen. Everything's wet around them. It's just a really shitty situation. And I think if I were in that situation, I might just be totally panicking, which would make me burn all these calories and use up all the oxygen in the cave. But what the coach had them do is he had them meditating all the time. They would just be kind of constantly meditating. And it was a way for them to all keep calm and conserve their energy and conserve their oxygen. And it was kind of amazing the videos that they showed of the boys in the cave. They just, they were complaining about being hungry and cold, but they were pretty chill. They were just accepting, like, this is the situation we're in. Hopefully someone's going to come rescue us. And then they just had to trust that whatever processes people were putting into place to help them were going to succeed. And, there was a very, very good chance that they wouldn't have succeeded and they wouldn't have made it through. But in that situation, panicking wouldn't have helped either. But because they were calm and peaceful and just accepted the situation they were in, it gave them a chance to be able to be rescued. and it ended up working. All of the kids were rescued from that cave. So
Mm,
it seems like a great analogy. And they were literally in the dark. They were
Mm.
yeah.
literally in the dark,
Mm-hmm.
experiencing the worst moments of their lives, and their calmness, their ability to meditate and accept the situation is what saved them.
And that's what Leslie was
That's
saying, that
pretty amazing.
she was had to just meditate through that time. And
Mm-hmm.
I think like, you know, listening to our intuition during those times, like my intuition literally was like, stop.
Mm-hmm.
Stop it. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
stop it. Stop
Oh, your
trying to do stuff.
intuition is so good.
Mm-hmm.
Stop it. I mean, you know, but I've cultivated this like trying to listen to my intuition, right? Because everything in our culture would be like, get out of the cave, like just run, you know, just do
Yes.
it, just use all your energy to do it. But like, yeah, if we really listen to our intuition during this dark time, what is it really saying to us?
Right. What is it asking you to do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
So what I'm thinking about is like, what if we confuse the panicked state with our intuition, like that fight or flight
Mm-hmm.
response? What if we
Yeah.
confuse that for what our intuition is trying to tell us?
We do that. I think a lot of people do that.
Mm.
And so it takes, that's kind of why I love like teaching about intuition and how to, and I think in some of our episodes we talked about more about intuition, right? Didn't we do a whole episode
Mm-hmm.
about it? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you tell the difference?
Mm-hmm.
And our intuition is, I just thought of something today. It's like our intuition and our mind have like kind of the same motive, which is to reach our goals, but it has a different way of going about it, right? And our intuition feels, it always leads us, like I said, to our more expanded, our deeper, more authentic self. And so our intuition, when we listen to it, feels like groundedness. It feels like, even though it might suck, it might not actually feel good to be like trying to rest, and but our intuition feels like it's 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 getting us to a place where we are more expanded. So if my intuition's telling me don't try to do anything, just sink deeper, right? Like that quote, like just go deeper to yourself. What that does in reaching our goal is like, Leslie, when you were in that place and your intuition was like, just meditate, it got you to a more grounded place so that when you got out of it, you're going to be able to reach your goal in a more easeful, whole way, more
Mm-hmm.
authentic way. Whereas in that cave example, if you're just using all of your energy trying to get out, you're going to be exhausted when you get out. You're not going to be able to write the book,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So your mind feels like, your mind's way of getting you to your goal is based around everything it's known before, everything the culture has put on you, that fight or flight. So your mind wants to reach your goal through, like our culture says, you know, just do it, hustle, or
Mm-hmm.
fight or flight. I got to do this because otherwise I'm going to sink, you know, down to the depths. Like, that's how your mind wants you to reach your goal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So does that make sense? But it feels
Yeah.
different, and it takes time to cultivate
Your
how you,
thinking mind.
your
Right.
thinking
Yeah,
rational
yeah.
mind. Yeah.
Right.
Or like, yeah, your analytical mind or your fight or
Right.
flight mind.
Right.
Right.
Because you want to survive. It wants you to survive.
Survival. Yeah.
It wants you to live, and that's,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, you gotta get out to live, right? You gotta get air to live, like,
Mm-hmm.
and then your intuition knows, like, oh,
Yeah.
this
Your
is how you
intuition
can
is a
thrive.
knowing, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
hard. We're not
Mm-hmm.
taught that. We're not
Right.
taught
So,
to listen to our intuition. We're taught to
right.
survive.
So
Oh.
that's why we're doing this podcast. It's like,
Right.
how do you, in a practical way, because your
Mm-hmm.
intuition is a knowing. It's just not using that analytical
Mm-hmm.
mind, which can be overtaken by the fight or flight, your fight or flight amygdala, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it can get you stuck in a loop. It
Mm-hmm.
can make
Mm-hmm.
you anxious. You know, you
Mm-hmm.
can have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of roadblocks that you encounter
Yeah.
if you just try and think your way out of a problem or
Yeah.
fight your way out of a problem.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um,
So we're literally just trying to teach you all how do we do it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
so Leslie, did you have any sort of meditation practice before you got sick?
I had tried it a few times,
Uh-huh.
but I never had any kind of consistent practice. So it wasn't brand new, but it was never a consistent presence for me.
How
And
did you
I,
learn how to meditate in the first place? Like
Yeah.
what was your
yeah,
method? Like practically speaking.
practically speaking, right? Well, I was in a hospital bed for most of my time. So I just did it in a hospital bed, but I was introduced to it when I first got admitted to this hospital. When they're going through all these checklists, and I had said that I'm someone who has depression and anxiety, and I'm definitely going to need some support for mental health. And they had suggested a couple of options, and one of the options was a chaplain. And it really kind of, at first, I was like, because I'm not a religious person, and that's what I associated a chaplain with. It was like some sort of religious
Yeah.
context. And they're like, no, it's really just someone to help you process this time that you're in. And she came in, and she and I ended up having a really strong connection, and she was amazing. And she just suggested, like, you might want to think about meditating. A lot of people find this beneficial in this time. And she had suggested this meditation app, and I don't know, something just like clicked for me in that.
Huh.
And I was like, I just had to do it. It just, I don't know that I would have been able to get through it as well as I did. It just allowed me to sort of, okay, this is what we're doing today. Like, just allowed me to accept the situation instead of
Yeah.
being consumed by my anxiety about it.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a similar I found meditation and Buddhism when I was in a really bad place in Cleveland. Like I hated it. I was so I mean, I was in such a bad place and I started meditating then. And I know Matt Allison, you and I don't think I could have gotten through it without that either. And
Yeah.
Allison, you had a meditation practice as well.
Yeah, I started going to this Buddhist monastery with my ex-husband as we were separating and getting a divorce. And we actually took this meditation class together at this Taiwanese Buddhist monastery. And he dropped off the face of the earth after a while, but I kept on going to the monastery 2 or 3 times a week, for the next several years, basically until I got pregnant and had a baby years later. And it was just so helpful for me to get through that situation. And then I started volunteering at the monastery to try and give back and help other people who might be going through a difficult time and might be reaching out for meditation and for, the basic teachings of Buddhism to help them think about the situations they were in and get through it, have some tools to deal with it. So, yeah, I think meditation is very healing. And, you know, even if you're not a Buddhist, some of the teachings of Buddhism, like for
Yeah.
instance, impermanence, thinking about impermanence and thinking about the usefulness of being present rather than, cycling on the past or being fearful of the future. A lot of those teachings are super, super practical and very helpful in kind of getting to that still place and getting to a place of acceptance from where you can start to hear your intuition and find your creativity.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
deep embodiment, which is what we're talking about, is one of the flow triggers, right? So when you're in flow, you're in that place of presence, and it helps you to get into flow and stay into flow. So we're going to wrap up. The other thing I just want to mention is that one thing that got me through is leaning on my friends and my therapists and my doctors. So that's just one thing I want to mention before we wrap up, to just really lean into your support. If you are struggling with mental illness, you
Mhm.
can contact.
There is a crisis number that you can call. It. The suicide and crisis hotline is 988. And to leave you at the end of this episode, we always want to give our 4%, just something little and attainable. And this week, we are asking you to think about, if you are stuck kind of in a dark place, or you've been really feeling stuck just about anything, maybe just work to identify what that is and what you might need to accept, that might be able to help you be able to move forward, as well as maybe either or, right? Also identifying what Allison was talking about, some of those things in life, the small joys in life, that you can begin to kind of reframe and look at some of the things that may not seem super significant, but also can pack a lot of joy into your life.
Great. So,
Great.
one reminder to, if you're enjoying this podcast, tell your friends, tell them about us, share, like, subscribe. Also, Esther, do you want to talk about some of the services that you offer?
Yeah, sure. I offer coaching, creative coaching. So if you are feeling stuck in your life or your creative journey, I teach classes and I have one-on-one coaching. So you can go to my website, flowintoauthenticity.com, and check those out, as well as my YouTube channel. And we will link all of those below.
Great. Well, so great to see you folks. I wish we were in
Yeah,
person so we
I
could have this
know.
magical, like, feeling each other's vibes,
we will someday.
sniffing each other's
Someday.
pheromones, or whatever you do with pheromones. Yeah, it'd be amazing. But anyhow, it's so good to
Yeah,
see you,
good to see
ladies.
Good
you.
to see you. All
See you
right.
all next
Okay.
time.
Bye.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.
Flow into Authenticity is hosted by Esther Loopstra, Leslie Blumenstein, and me, Allison Henrich. Our original theme music is by James Wetzel. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share Flow into Authenticity from your favorite podcast app.